In my opinion, the biggest part of each individual FNAF game that gives them their identity is their roster of animatronics. Over the course of the series, Scott made a conscious effort with each game to introduce us to a new and interesting roster of characters, which worked with what the thematic of that installment was. With a series this big and an iconic roster of characters filling every single installment, naturally you'd have your favorites and least favorites among them. So that's what I plan to talk about today. In this video, I plan to take a look at each of the main series FNAF games and pick out my absolute favorite animatronic from each one, with a detailed explanation as to why I feel that way. The games I'll be including for this will be the first 4, Sister Location, Pizza Sim, Help Wanted, and Security Breach. The main games I've left out for this video are Ultimate Custom Night because, well, it introduces no new characters unless you count the Fredbear Easter egg in Shadow Dee Dee, and Special Delivery, as I feel the animatronics in that game fall more into the skins category rather than individual and interesting characters. And that brings me to the only rule I'm putting on myself for this video, that being that I have to pick a new and unique version of whatever character I pick when talking about my favorites. I can't say that FNAF 1 Bonnie is my favorite in both FNAF 1 and Help Wanted. I have to pick someone new that was introduced in that title, whether it be a new variation of an old character or a brand new edition entirely. Starting things off here, we have the FNAF game with arguably the most iconic roster of animatronics the series has to offer. I find that part of what made FNAF 1 work so well on its release was just how solid the designs of each and every one of its animatronics are. I find that these characters are just simple enough that you can easily recreate their designs in both fan art as well as models, but just unique enough that they're easily recognizable. With that said though, figuring out which of these 5 characters from FNAF 1 was my favorite was actually the easiest part of making this video, and that's because my favorite from this game has been my favorite for years now, and that's Bonnie. I feel like FNAF 1's Bonnie is the best example of how the series is able to take characters that should be child-friendly and turn them into something terrifying. Bonnie's design and use in FNAF 1 perfectly bridge the idea of him being both a child-friendly entertainer as well as a creepy monster which hunts you down each night. His eyes which don't fit in their sockets properly, his large permanent grin, and his lack of eyebrows and expression make him unnerving in a way that feels more subtle than other characters in the series. This perfectly coincides with the way Bonnie is utilized throughout the game. Bonnie, out of all the characters in FNAF 1, has the eeriest Easter eggs and renders throughout the game of him, making him stand out to me more than everyone else did. Things like the Bonnie death screen, the way he stands at the end of the hall, only being revealed by a single flickering light bulb, and the way he occasionally stares directly into the camera in Parts and Service, are all examples of standout moments which make Bonnie so damn creepy in FNAF 1, making him easily my favorite character in both this game as well as the whole series. Boasting one of the largest and most iconic rosters in the whole series, just picking one favorite from FNAF 2 was a very difficult process. And while I feel like it may be a redundant answer considering who my favorite in FNAF 1 is, my choice for this game has to be Withered Bonnie. I feel like out of all the characters in FNAF 2, there's just something so unique and special about Withered Bonnie. Something as simple as Bonnie missing his face became what I'd argue is one of the most unique and iconic designs Scott made for the whole series, and it certainly left a long-lasting impression on me when I first saw it. Seeing the trailer for this game was when I first fell in love with this character design. The way that his missing face just becomes a black void with beady red dots glowing through it was a really eerie image that was hard to get out of my head. Actually seeing him in the game was even scarier. Scott did a great job at making Withered Bonnie this really intimidating presence. When he enters your office, he absolutely towers over you, staring you down the whole time with his beady black eyes. Seeing him on the cameras is freaky too, with him shuffling from room to room, always leaning to one side like the weight of his one arm is pulling his entire body down with it. The only real complaint I have with this version of the character is one I have with several characters in FNAF 2, that being that mechanically he isn't very unique or interesting. But this doesn't really take away from just how much I love everything else about him. I mean, Scott literally took my favorite character and made him even cooler and more unique looking, so it's really hard for him not to be my favorite. Okay, so I think we all know what my answer for this game's gonna be, because in my opinion there's only one answer that actually makes sense. The Phantom characters, while I don't mind them, aren't really characters at all. All their designs are retextures of old characters, and their lore is nothing more than being a hallucination. So of course my answer is going to be Springtrap. But other than the fact that he feels like the only real answer to me, Springtrap makes up for that by being one of the most interesting and iconic characters in the whole series. While I feel like Springtrap fell off as a character in some of the later installments, there's no denying how amazing this original version of the character is. The moldy, rotten design of Springtrap with the human bit sticking out from the holes in his body is a design choice that is entirely unique to him and him alone, and his impact on the series' lore is undeniable, with him being single-handedly responsible for basically every event that set the story into motion. As well as this, being the only true threat in FNAF 3, Scott went out of his way to make Springtrap a very complex and difficult threat to deal with over the course of the game. The fact that you have to use such unreliable tools to track down and fend off a threat which makes an effort to hide and evade you makes dealing with Springtrap feel like some kind of prolonged boss fight, and that alone makes him a very interesting character to me. He may be the obvious pick for this game, but he's a great one regardless of that. So if I'm being honest with you guys, the Nightmare animatronics from FNAF 4 are some of my favorite designs in the entire series. I understand a lot of the complaints I've seen for them in the past, with them feeling like Scott was trying really hard to make them scary looking for the fourth game, but honestly, I just can't help but love every single one of them. Something about all the rips and tears, the metal caged eyes, and the razor-sharp teeth and claws just do it for me. I feel like all these characters are a favorite of mine for one reason or another, but among all the Nightmare animatronics, there's one that stands out more than the rest, and that's Nightmare. From the second I first saw Nightmare on Night 7 of FNAF 4, I was obsessed with this monstrous shadowy bear. Sure, you could argue that his design isn't that great due to just being a recolor of Nightmare Fredbear, but I'd argue that Scott did a lot with him despite that fact. The black, shadowy body of Nightmare, combined with the fact that his body is slightly transparent, makes him look like some kind of terrifying ghost which made its way into your house. I just love the way that his glowing red eyes are always visible through the dark body, making it feel like he's always watching you. I feel like even though he's a recolor, Nightmare is not given enough credit for how effective he is at what he does, especially considering there are other recolored characters in the series who are extremely popular like Golden Freddy and Lefty. I just don't know why he's the one who gets criticized for being a recolor while they're praised. But tangent aside, the main reason I love Nightmare comes from the mystery behind him. The mystery around the identity of Nightmare is something which has always intrigued me to the point of even wanting to dedicate an entire video to talking about it. With each game released in the series, we get more potential clues as to who he could be, each one having the potential to be right, but also conflicting with the others. Is he a twisted animatronic using a disc to make us hallucinate what he looks like? Is he a shadowy representation of death in the form of Fredbear? Is he a shadow animatronic invading our dreams? Each one of these conclusions are entirely possible, but none have been confirmed, so my interest in finding the truth to who Nightmare is continues to grow each day. I think Nightmare is incredibly underrated, and definitely deserves to get some more discussion around him in the future. Being the first game in the series to have full voice acting for the animatronics, the Funtime characters from Sister Location boast a lot of personality that other characters in the series just don't have. For this reason, I view each and every one of them as a very solid pick to be someone's favorite. Even characters like Funtime Foxy, who in my opinion didn't have much going on in Sister Location, got fleshed out a lot in later games like Ultimate Custom Night. Picking a favorite out of this bunch was probably one of the hardest choices from any of the games I've covered thus far, but in the end, that choice was made, and I chose Ennard. I made a whole video talking about my love of Ennard and their use in the fake ending of this game, so I don't want to go too into detail on stuff I've already explained here, but there's some other things I didn't bring up about Ennard that make him my favorite that I'd love to talk about here. Mainly just his use and his concept in the overall story of Sister Location. I think the idea of this massive hybrid of 4 other animatronics is super creative and unique for the series, and I absolutely love the way that it was executed with Ennard. The massive entanglement of wires, the eyeballs hanging from all over their body, and the fact that their design over the series changes to fit whoever leads the mass, are all things that are entirely unique to Ennard, which make me obsessed with the character. I also just love the way they get used at the end, with their name both being a pun because of the fact that they're made up of the animatronics innards, as well as them literally becoming your innards. What can I say, I'm a sucker for creative wordplay. Ennard is definitely the most standout character to me in Sister Location, and the final boss fight you can do with them at the end of the game is just the cherry on top for things that make me adore them. If you want to see me fawn even more over Ennard and the night associated with him, by the way, I'll link a little card in the top corner to go check that out when you're done here. Pizzeria Simulator was the game in the series which introduced us to the most unique characters within a single game. The Trash Gang, Mediocre Melodies, the Rock Stars, and of course the Scrap Animatronics all originated in this title, so naturally there's a lot to pick from here. Funnily enough though, despite the game having such a massive selection of characters for me to choose from, I've always known who my favorite was since day one, and that character is Lefty. Lefty is, in my opinion, the most interesting character to come out of Pizzeria Simulator. Alongside these terrifying scrapped animatronics, we have this polished and clean-looking black bear, who despite looking the most harmless out of the bunch is easily the most unstable and dangerous. It was this that made Lefty so interesting to me, with my obsession I had with the character only growing the more I learnt about him. The fact that you can purchase him for $5 with a liability risk of 9 made me wonder what it was that made Lefty so dangerous. And the game kept me asking this question when it was revealed that Lefty was the only character to be present in all 3 phases of the game: the Tycoon phase, Salvage phase, and Office phase. This mystery surrounding Lefty continued until I found out the truth behind their identity, with it being revealed that the puppet was trapped inside Lefty all along. This was a twist which really caught me off guard, making it probably my most fond memory of Pizzeria Sim outside of the ending. On top of all that, I just think Lefty is really cool looking. The black and red and yellow color scheme is really cool and sleek looking, making this recolor of Rockstar Freddy actually stand out as a unique character despite that fact to me. Despite Help Wanted not being the most well-known for its character additions to the series, we actually got some very memorable and well-designed animatronics out of the few that were there. The Plush Babies, Grim Foxy, and Dreadbear are all examples of animatronics who were introduced to Help Wanted, all bringing interesting designs and mechanics to the table that we never saw before. And then there was easily the most well-known of Help Wanted's additions to the series, as well as my favorite from this game, Glitch Trap. If I'm being honest, Glitch Trap is probably my favorite version of William Afton the series ever had. The classic Springtrap is amazing, don't get me wrong, but there's something so creepy and interesting about Glitch Trap that made him stick with me much more when I first saw him. I mainly think that comes from the air of mystery which surrounds him that isn't as present with the other versions of the character. What he's doing in this game, how he plans to control us, what he really wants, it's all left up to us to figure out, and that makes him much more scary to me. I also just think that this is my favorite version of Springtrap we got design-wise. There's something that's really novel to me about finally having a proper Spring Bonnie design in one of the games that isn't in the form of pixel art, even if it isn't the most accurate to the original design. And this official Spring Bonnie design is great. I love how he looks and moves like someone in a costume rather than an animatronic, and I love the oversized grin and eyes which capture that perfect eerie feeling I love seeing from the characters in this series. It gives off the same kind of vibe I love from FNaF 1's Bonnie, making it probably my second favorite character design we got in the whole series. I feel like Glitchtrap's presence in FNaF VR made the whole game feel a lot creepier than it would have been if it was just a collection of short FNaF games, and I really love him for that reason. He adds a level of meta lore that I never expected FNaF to delve into, but I can't exactly say I'm opposed to it. The final game I'll be talking about here today is going to be the latest in the main series of FNaF games, Security Breach, which is very fitting to be the last considering this was easily the hardest for me to decide a favorite for. If I'm being honest, this game has my favorite roster of animatronics in the whole series. I love all their designs, I find their personalities very charming, and I feel like each one of them aside from Burn Trap all have really cool segments dedicated to them. So finding one favorite was very difficult for me. But at the end of the day, I still had to pick one, and my choice ended up being Roxy. Roxy was a character I wasn't too fond of when the game came out, who slowly grew on me as I finished my first playthrough of Security Breach. I found that as I went through the game, I grew more and more interested in her and what was going on with her behind the scenes, with my love for her happening when I finally got to that chase segment in Roxy Raceway. The chase scene where she hunts you down without any eyes, forcing you to let her get dangerously close before just barely dodging out of the way, is probably the most stressed I was in my first playthrough of the game, and it stuck with me for a while because of that. I also find her personality to be the most interesting out of all the characters in the game, with the whole idea of her arrogance just being a facade to mask her insecurity. It makes it feel really bad when she loses her eyes near the end, making it seem like we took the one thing she had that actually made her feel proud of herself, being her eyesight. I feel like Roxy is a surprisingly complex character among the animatronics in Security Breach, and it makes me really love her as well as all the other characters the game has to offer. She also has the benefit of being really hot. Those were my favorite characters from all the FNaF games in the main series. This video was a ton of fun to make since I just love talking about characters I like, especially when it comes to the FNaF games. I'd love to hear what your guys' favorite characters from each game are in the comments below, since I feel like this is a discussion topic that I'll see a lot of differing opinions on. I'd also like to just see how similar my opinions are to everyone else's. Either way though, that's enough from me for now. I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I have making it. I look forward to seeing you in whatever my next project ends up being. Goodbye for now.